Hello and welcome to the September 27th meeting of the MCCSC Board of School Trustees. We ask that everyone please come to order. I now declare the 2023 budget hearing open. Mr. Kenny, you may proceed.
Good evening, President Schur, Dr. Oswald, members of the board. Tonight is the public hearing on the 2023 budget. Previously, the 2023 budget has been presented and reviewed at the August 23rd board meeting. Authorization to advertise took place at the August board meeting as well. The budget is advertised at the state of Indiana's Gateway website as well as the MCCSC website. The funds that are included in the 2023 budget include the referendum fund, debt service fund, school pension debt fund, education fund, and the operations fund. The budget estimate for these five funds for 2023 is $157,833,564 in total. Estimated funds to be raised total $62,463,440, which represents the MCCSC's requested amounts from our tax levies. The current tax levy column shows the Department of Local Government Finance approved amount of our tax levy for the 2022 calendar year. As a reminder, the budget adoption will take place at the October board meeting. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Are there any comments from the board regarding the budget, 2023 budget hearing? All right, and there are no comments that have been given in regarding that, no public comments. So we will now move on to the September meeting of the Board of School Trustees. And now I call this meeting to order. This is a time that we set aside to share recent events celebrating members of our school community. Dr. Winston, will you please share that with us?
Yes. Yes, thank you, President Schur, Dr. Oswald, Board of Trustees, and community members. It is my pleasure to share a few highlights of this month's celebration of success. Our 2023 National Merit Scholar semifinalists. Congratulations to the following MCCSC students for becoming National Merit Scholarship Program semifinalists. They include, from Bloomington High School North, Rachel Allison, Brady Christensen, Rodden Harris, Vincent Kreft, Aika Noguchi, and Jack Steiner. From Bloomington High School South, we have Karina Jacobson, Ethan King, Rebecca Mao, Nora Nelson Laird, Caleb Okolski, and Shrung Patel. Congratulations to all of our students. A second area of our celebration of success is our Intercultural Eye for Art, Indiana Hiroshima Student Art Exchange for Becoming a Global Citizen. 4 MCCSC art teachers, Hannah Schuler, Childs Elementary, Chelsea Blanchard, Clear Creek Elementary, Cassidy Young, Academy of Science and Entrepreneurship, and Cheryl Maxwell from Grandview Elementary collaborated with a cooperating teacher in Hiroshima, Japan, to help children in both countries create art and develop an intercultural eye for art, with a focus on perception and empathy for an enculturated worldview. The art-making process was intended to carry over to everyday life and help children develop relationships with culturally different others while developing their own individuality. So we're very excited about our partnership there. And finally, our Equity Spotlight Award. The Monroe County Community School Corporation created the Equity Spotlight Award to recognize students, faculty, staff, student organizations, schools, and community partners for fostering inclusive environments that reflect the values and the mission, vision, and core values of MCCSC. This month's Equity Spotlight Award recipient is the Marion Armstrong Exhibit Committee of the Monroe County Public Library. The Marion Armstrong Exhibit Committee receives this award for collaborating with community partners to create a learning environment and experience, reaffirming our students' sense of belonging in the community. In February 2022, the committee hosted 6th grade students from Fairview, Templeton, and University Elementary Schools as special guests of Our Voice, celebrating the Coretta Scott King Illustrator Awards exhibit in February of 2022. And we have several members of that committee present tonight, including Lisa Champelli, Dana Duffy, Shirley Fitzgibbons, Nola Hartman, Delois Holiday, Tanya Connerman, Mary Pop, Jenny Ritchie, and Mary Jean Rigoli. We're very appreciative of your service and commitment to our community.
If you guys don't
Thank you.
mind standing, we can give you a round of applause. We would appreciate it. I know you're. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. On the behalf of the board, thank you, Dr. Winston, and congratulations to all of you that have been recognized tonight. We will now move on to public comments. Just a handful of reminders. When you're called to the podium, please state your name and agenda or item topic. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Ms. Butcher over there will ring the bell once to signal that you have 30 seconds to finish your comment to the board. When your 3 minutes has ended, you will hear the bell ring 5 times. This is a signal your time is up. You will need to be seated. I'm only giggling because I think we all know if you hear a bell ring over and over again, that it's time to finish it up. If you're part of a concerned group, please select one person as your spokesperson. Your point has been made, and in the interest of time, we ask that you please pass when called upon. Please know that there is no commenting on personnel issues. First, we have Elizabeth Bullock, and after that, Maria Douglas.
Good evening, everyone. I can talk a little slower because I don't have quite as much to say. I'm Elizabeth Bullock, mother of a sophomore at South High School. It's been a few months since I've been here, vacations, graduate school, kid activities, work. But I'm no less committed to the ongoing conversations about school safety here in Bloomington. So I do want to begin tonight by thanking the school district for their transparency and timely communication after the Bachelor Middle School bus incident this month. We've now been attending school board meetings for right about 1 year. And one of our asks has been better communication about safety incidents that really happened this time. I'm grateful the gun threat was mitigated quickly and that parents were informed. That being said, I think this incident again highlights why we continue to have concerns about the prevalence of guns in the hands of our children. Also want to thank President Sir for adding school safety to the agenda last month and developing avenues for parents, students, and teachers and the public to provide feedback. We do feel heard, and we appreciate the board acknowledging the need for ongoing discussion and planning around safety. A few quick points this month I'd like to make. It was brought to my attention that Mccsc hired armed security for homecoming weekend events. So with the increased fighting and violence at the North-South football game this year, I understand why the school system added that additional safety measure. But that being said, this action seems a little bit incongruent with the board's position on de-arming school resource officers. This isn't the first time that social events have included armed security. So why is armed security for the school campus appropriate for homecoming events, but not for the school day? Secondly, I really want to encourage the board to explore opportunities to partner and collaborate with law enforcement. While I know there are strong feelings and stigma associated with law enforcement in our country, I do believe it's possible to collaborate and address disparities and disproportionality if the right people are at the table. So with the sheriff's election before us, there's really good opportunity to explore how school and police partnership can improve the programs you already have in place. I work at the national level now, not locally, but I do know Bloomington has always been a community that prides itself on collaborative practice. School safety of our children is a community issue. It's not just a school problem. So that means the community, all of us need to come together, those people that are serving the community, to be part of planning. So we're all invested in this. We're waiting. We're ready to join you in protecting our most vulnerable youth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maria Douglas, and then after that, Julie Hood.
Almost our 1 year anniversary of knowing each other in this capacity. So Maria Douglas, mother of an 8th grader at Jackson Creek and a junior at South. So first and foremost, I just want to echo what Elizabeth said. Thank you for the clear and timely communication about the gun incident on the bus at Bachelor. Mr. Finley's email reported what happened, how the situation was rectified, and what the consequences were for that student. And I believe the email went out shortly after 9 a.m. that day. So this is the type of communication that I've been asking for, timely, how was it rectified and what the consequences were. So we're not out there wondering or hearing second, third hand from kids, and speculating about what's going on. I'm also grateful and interested to see how the new question feedback tool is utilized that you guys rolled out last month, and how you all respond to what's been submitted. I do see this, and have publicly said that I believe this was a good move for the board. So thank you so much. Second, because there's always a second, right? It was extremely disappointing to me to hear Florida research regarding SRO's reference at the candidate for school board forum last evening. Whereas that event had nothing to do with this current board, a candidate did continue this board's rhetoric of data and research against the arming of SROs from states that don't have the training laws or participate in or follow state and national guidelines like Indiana has. Please remember, Indiana SRO programs are very different from Florida's. And also remember that there can hardly be data on what violence has been deterred from SROs having all the tools that they need to do their job, because it doesn't actually happen. Again, this is a yes, for me, this is a yes and situation. It's not just armed SROs and that's it. It's SROs. I want every precaution to be taken to protect our children and staff. Mccsc again opted for the SRO program. So let's have it in its totality if we're going to have it or not have it. Along with all the other programs and strategies we need to monitor and improve mental health, parental education, and inclusion. And finally, I was glad to hear that most of the candidates running for these open seats are concerned with school safety and transparent communication with the public. And I hope this board continues to grow their empathy and strategies around communication with the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Julie, and then after that, Jenny Robinson.
Hello, my name is Julie Hood. To respect the 3-minute time limit, please excuse me because I'm probably going to read from my sheet so I don't get all discombobulated. My name is Julie Hood and I'm a mother of 3 young kids and a resident in the Mccsc district. I'm appearing before you tonight to ask if the school board and administration would consider swapping elementary and high school start times. This would allow the high schools to start later and the teenagers to get more sleep, and would allow the elementary school students to get out sooner. I'm sure most of you know there's research out there that supports that later high school start times are better for teenagers. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that high schools start after 8:30 a.m. and our district currently starts at 7:45. I can list many other statistics about teenagers' circadian rhythms, forcing them to go to bed later, and that teenagers still need 8.5 to 10 hours of sleep for proper development. But I only have 3 minutes, so if you need to hear any more of those facts, you can come find me after the meeting. Let's talk about the positive impact of later high school start times. Later start times decrease sleep deprivation, which makes a huge impact to improve teenagers' mental health. Thus, it has been proven that districts with later start times have less depression and less need for medication to treat depression. Later high school start times leads to improvement in attendance, tardiness decreases, and some have even seen a decrease in car accidents because of alertness, and even a decrease in student athlete injuries because the athletes get more sleep. I understand that swapping high school and elementary start times would be a big change for the district, and that is why I just want to start the discussions now. I know there would be a lot of logistics to work through, such as extracurricular activities, family schedules, and more, but I don't think logistics should allow us to ignore the research and stop us from considering this important change. I know many Indianapolis districts have recently made the change to later high school start times, and I think we could learn from them and learn from our community if we seriously started this discussion. Why am I up here when I don't even have a high school student? I think an additional benefit for flipping high school and elementary start times is that young children aren't asked to focus until 4:20 p.m. when they've been up since 6 a.m. because that's their circadian rhythm. The data supports that changing start times benefits all children at every age. Thus, now is the time to start having this conversation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, Jenny Robinson, and after that, Paul Farmer.
Hi, I'm Jenny Robinson. I'm here today as a parent of 2 children in MCCSC, one in middle school and one in high school. Like other parents, I've been unnerved by discoveries of guns in students' possession this year and last year. Yet even with recent events, from my perspective, as a parent, I value the board's decision that school resource officers should not carry guns. With every new incident of a shooting in a school, I feel again both fear and heartache. When my kids leave in the morning for school, the fact that many children may have access to guns is in the back of my mind. I know that we all share a desire to prevent or avert the unthinkable situation and want the school equipped to respond should one occur. but I do not believe that introducing weapons into the mix is the answer. I value our district's ongoing efforts and the efforts of administrators in all of our school buildings to create a school climate that is truly supportive of students, of their individuality, their emotions, and their need for love and understanding. Places where children feel nurtured, valued, and respected are places where children are ready to learn, challenge themselves, and grow. Relationships of trust between adults and students are the healthy soil in which curiosity, empathy, and academic exploration can develop. Relationships of trust, I believe, are more powerful than any metal detector or the threat of any armed response by an officer, and they work in another way entirely, one that would be undermined by metal detectors, clear backpacks, and guns. Clear data may be lacking in the area of armed SROs in schools, but there is research that suggests they can have neutral or negative effects. The University of Connecticut School of Education published a piece in 2020 by a doctoral candidate called The Presence and Price of Police in Schools. The researcher, Chelsea Connery, cites a disproportionate psychological impact on students of color. She also says that SROs cannot guarantee safety, can have a negative impact on safety, are associated with higher rates of exclusionary discipline and arrest, can infringe on students' civil rights, and can interfere with education. I hope that on this issue, we can step back and look at the data as much as possible. I know that all parents want their kids to be safe in school. I hope we can all support efforts to educate the community about safe storage of guns so that kids in our community are less likely to gain access to lethal weapons. And I hope that we can support more counselors and school psychologists as mental health issues are increasing during the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Paul Farmer.
Thank you, President Scherer, School Board, Dr. Oswald. I got a couple of things tonight. I just want to talk about a few things. So it's a variety. The first one is the topic of the Memorandum of Understanding that we're going to be talking about here in a little bit. On behalf of MCEA, and I've already told Dr. Oswald that we do support it unanimously. And at the same time, we also obviously 100% support with the referendum as well. And we look forward to working with the Yes for MCSC PAC to help them to do that. In that same kind of a conversation, talking about registering to vote. This is not a presidential year to vote. Sometimes as people have a tendency to not to get out as often. And so encouraging the community to make sure that we have all of our friends are registered to vote. The registration date is coming very quickly. So we want to make sure that they are registered, especially our college students from IU. I actually worked in 2016, the IU campus and the IU students. They came in droves. And of course, every one of them, I think, voted for the referendum because we said, you want band, you want so on and so forth. And they all voted for it. This is traditionally one of the times when IU students don't vote very much. So we want to make sure that we encourage them to register and get out and vote on that day. The other thing too is the early voting itself is actually starting in about 2 weeks. That's crazy. So we don't have much time left, maybe 6 weeks before actual November 8th. So it's really coming quickly. The very last thing I wanted to talk about has kind of been mentioned already tonight. Last night we had the Mccsc Candidate School Board Forum at Tri-North Middle School. It was a wonderful event. And if you didn't get a chance to see it, it's going to be out on Cats soon. I don't know the exact date yet. I haven't had a chance to find it. But one of the things that I do want to do on behalf of MCEA, I want to thank every one of the candidates that are there and that are running. We have a democracy, and this is what true democracy is about. We had on that, there's no way you could vote for everybody. It's not. I mean, there were so much a variety of the different opinions. And that's what's wonderful about it. You do have people who against arming SROs, those who supported it, those who support this, support that. It's a variety. And that's what's wonderful. So when you go to vote this year, make sure you take a look at the candidates. I know ICPE is going to be posting all of their questions that they had. They're going to do it on their website. So you need to educate yourself on all the candidates before you go and vote. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone that shared their comments tonight, and appreciate you coming out and sharing those things with us. Next, we're going to move on to the consent agenda, and that includes minutes, board meeting held on August 23rd, 2022, ECA expenditures, overnight and out-of-state field trips, financial report, August 2022, appropriation balance report, August 2022, register of claims, September 27th, 2022, payroll, register and payroll claims, August 2022. Do I have a motion regarding the approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is so moved by Ross and seconded by Martha, that we approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, no. Any abstentions? Motion carried. Next, we'll move on to donations. We have received donations over $22,000. And we would like to thank all of those generosity of all those donors. Do you have a motion to accept the donations?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's moved by Kathy and second by Martha that we accept the donations as presented. All those in favor of the motion to approve the donations, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, no. Any abstentions? Motion has carried. Next is the second and the final reading for the following policies. Do I have a motion to adopt the following policies? Policies 1521, administration, 3121, professional staff, 4121, support staff, personal background checks, criminal history checks, and mandatory reporting of convictions and arrests, policy 8120, volunteers, volunteer coaches, and policy 8121, contracted services, personal background checks, and to retire policy 4120 as presented.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay. So it's moved by Elizabeth and seconded by April that we adopt the policies and retire policy 4120 volunteers as presented. Dr. Stallman, will you share with us?
Thank you, President Scher, Dr. Oswald, and members of the Board of School Trustees. It is recommended by the board that the board adopt the following policies as stated: policies 1521 administration, 3121 professional staff, 4121 support staff, which is dealing with personal background checks, criminal history checks, and mandatory reporting of convictions and arrests. And then as stated, policy 8120, volunteers and volunteer coaches, and policy 8121, which is contracted services, personal background checks. These changes were presented for first reading at the August 23rd meeting of the board. All prior policies then relating to 1521, 3121, 4121, 8120, and 8121 are hereby rescinded, deemed null and void, and replaced by the policies adopted on this day, September 27, 2022. In addition, policy 4120.08, volunteers will be retired as presented at the August 23rd meeting of the board. I so recommend.
Are there any comments from the board regarding these policies? Okay. Thank you very much. All those in favor of the motion to adopt said policies and to retire policy 4120 volunteers signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, no. Any abstentions? Motion has carried. Next, we move on to the personnel report. Do I have a motion to approve the personnel report as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It is moved by Kathy and second by April that we approve the personnel report as presented. Dr. Solomon, will you please share with us again?
Thank you. This evening, I would like to recognize one retirement included in the personnel recommendations. Cynthia Whitehead is retiring as the lead administrative assistant at Bloomington High School South after serving our students and staff at Mccsc since 2006. Thank you, Cynthia, for your many years of service to our corporation, students, and community. I recommend that the board approve the personnel report as presented in the board packet.
Do we have any comments from the board regarding the personnel report? All right. Thank you very much for sharing that. All those in favor of the motion to approve the personnel report, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, no. Any abstentions? The motion has carried. Next, we will move on to contracts. Do I have a motion to approve the contracts as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is moved by Ross and seconded by Martha that we approve the contracts as presented. Mr. Kenny, will you please share those with us?
Hello, there are a number of contracts before you tonight. I recommend approval of the contracts as presented.
All right. Do I have any comments from the board regarding the contracts? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Kenny. All those in favor of the motion to approve the contracts, please signify by saying aye. Against, no. Any abstentions? The motion has carried. Next is the recommendation to adopt Resolution 2022-15, transferring amount from the retirement bond fund to the school pension debt fund. Do I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-15 as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second? It's been moved by Martha and seconded by Kathy that we adopt Resolution 2022-15 as presented. Mr. Kenny, will you please share that with us?
As a part of the 2023 budget process, we will be transferring an amount from the retirement bond fund to the school pension debt fund. This transfer will be of an amount that is roughly equivalent to the previous year's tax levy amounts and will allow the MCCSC to avoid a tax levy in the school pension debt fund for 2023. The Department of Local Government Finance has recommended that we document this transfer in the form of a resolution approved by the board. I recommend approval of Resolution 2022-15.
All right. Are there any comments for the board regarding this resolution? Thank you, Mr. Kenny. All those in favor of the motion to adopt Resolution 2022-15, transferring amount from the retirement bond fund to the school pension debt fund as presented, please signify by saying aye. Against, no. Any abstentions? Motion has carried. Next, we'll move on to the recommendation to adopt Resolution 2022-16, budget reductions. Do I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-16 as presented? Do
So moved.
I have a second?
Second.
It is moved by Martha and seconded by Elizabeth that we adopt Resolution 2022-16 as presented. Mr. Kenny.
Resolution 2022-16 gives the MCCSC Business Office one additional process for managing our budget throughout the year. Traditionally, the state of Indiana, through the Department of Local Government Finance, would reduce our budget after we submitted in Gateway in early November. Historically, we had done an additional appropriation to have our full budget restored. This resolution allows us to work with the DLGF in real time to reduce our 2022 budget, thereby eliminating the need for additional appropriations in January. This resolution and process has worked well last year. I recommend approval of this resolution by the board.
Are there any comments from the board regarding this resolution? Okay, thank you, Mr. Kenny. All those in favor of the motion to adopt Resolution 2022-16 budget reductions as presented, please signify by saying aye. Against, no. Any abstentions? Motion has carried. Our last consideration is the recommendation to adopt Resolution 2022-17 and Memoranda of Understanding. Do I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-17 and Memoranda of Understanding as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's moved by Ross and seconded by Elizabeth that we adopt Resolution 2022-17 and Memoranda of Understanding as presented. Dr. Stahlbaum, will you please share that with us?
Thank you. Per Resolution 2022-17 and pending approval by voters of the referendum on November 8, 2022, the following statements are intentions for referendum dollar expenditures. 1, the MCCSC certified employee base salary will increase by $4,500 beginning with the 2022-2023 school year. 2nd, the MCCSC non-certified exempt employee base salary will increase by $4,500 beginning with the 2022-2023 school year. And the MCCSC non-certified employee hourly wage will increase by $2.25 beginning on November 9th, 2022. It is my recommendation, after seeking relevant support of the Monroe County Education Association as led by President Paul Farmer and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Local 3995 as led by President Randy Tackett, that the Board of School Trustees approve Resolution 2022-17 and the accompanying memoranda of understanding as presented in the board packet.
Are there any comments from the board regarding this resolution and the memoranda of understanding? Thank you, Dr. Stallman. All those in favor of the motion to adopt Resolution 2022-17 and memoranda of understanding as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against no, any abstentions? The motion has carried. Dr. Oswald, do you have any district updates for us tonight?
I do, as you're well aware, we will be speaking on the first of many topics related to our strategic plan, the first of which being equity goal number 1, related to access and opportunity. So I do want to thank, and I'll talk about this a little later on, the many people who contributed to this conversation. What you're going to find throughout the flow of this is we'll kind of have a lead person, but then you'll see some microphones so that when someone asks a question, even though Mr. Terwilliger and I are going to sort of lead the presentation and conversation tonight, if it's related to something that's responsibility of Dr. Prinkert, she might provide a 30-second answer. If it's related to work for Dr. Winston, she might provide a 30-second answer, and so on and so forth. So we do want to answer the questions that were asked to us. And again, we're grateful for everyone who participated and provided us some guidance on some of the topics they'd like to hear. And one last reminder that our strategic plan is 3.5 years, and we're in the first year of it. And so some of the questions asked, we don't have answers for, and they're good to keep on the front burner that we continue to explore and look for answers. But we don't pretend to come with all the answers. So then with that, we're going to start a little PowerPoint here. So brace yourself, and Mr. Terwilliger.
Good evening, President Scherer, Dr. Oswald, members of the board. It's my pleasure to present this evening to you the first in a series of updates on our work as a corporation on our strategic goals and priorities. Today's focus is equity goal 1, access and opportunity, and it's going to be very hard to fit in all of the work that's being done into such a short presentation, but we did our best attempt, and we're excited to bring that to you today. So access and opportunity, and a little intro for you. Just as a reminder, and before diving in today, I'd kind of be remiss if not displaying our kind of gold standard definition of educational equity as our source of guiding light as we're working through our strategic goals and priorities. I'm not going to read it verbatim for you here today, but as you can see, this helps us greatly as we work towards practices representative of all people with a focus on access, meaningful participation, and positive outcomes and high quality learning experiences for all. So as we focus on equity, and as particularly educational equity, we do focus on these terms as we move forward in our work. Also, as a reminder, today's spotlight is on equity goal 1. Topics in future months on other goals are displayed as shown. We will call into focus today, particularly with equity goal 1, on how we are studying increased options for student needs, and how especially we are ensuring safe and reliable transportation for our students to further our work on increasing access and choice to schools and programs. So just for some context to start out our presentation today, as we work on our positive learning outcomes for students, we've kind of subdivided our focus into areas of choice, access, and student options, and also wanted to present to you kind of a little bit more of a subdivision between work that's current and work that will be ongoing as anticipated. So in areas of choice, access and options currently 22 through 23, our work on graduation pathways, 32 plus ways to get a diploma, access, on-time transportation for our students to their current school, all of the work that is ongoing to deliver the best, most efficient and on-time transportation system possible, and options in developing new student programs. We're taking a look pretty much at everything that's on the table for us. And part of that is an increased student voice as feedback for us as far as what options we'd like to develop. In ongoing 23 through 25 work, we anticipate expanding our programs and implementing programs that we are studying in our work. And in terms of access, potentially expanding shuttle services for increased access. We brought to the board in April the idea of hub and spoke routing for potentially moving to a program, even if it's not a program that is in your home districted area. We will be taking a look at more of those access related options for us, as well as strategies for removing barriers to access. Barriers defined as potentially program capacity, location, and program awareness. And as far as future options, increasing readiness to learn incoming kindergarten students, making sure they're ready to be a kindergarten student, as well as continued enrollment outcomes and analyses to measure program success. So we are going to measure what we are studying, and we're going to take a look at where we're at, and we're going to iterate appropriately based off of our research and our study. So we know as we focus on our work, we're kind of guided by the following principles, right? Especially towards equity goal 1. We need to maximize student instructional time. We brought to you, and I'll reshare some of the data we brought to you in April's board meeting, but essentially, we found that we were having very inefficient transportation practices that were not allowing us to have an environment where we had maximized student instructional time. So we know we needed to gain efficient transportation practices to increase access and opportunity to additional student programming. And that's just one key component, one guiding principle that we focus on as we continue our work. But the next is, of course, increasing student academic results. And how can we do that? Well, increasing readiness to learn, as I mentioned on a prior slide, but also increasing equitable participation by course and program, increasing post-secondary educational enrollment and attainment, and reducing disparities in educational outcomes. And so these are really our key guiding principles as we do continue our work and our focus moving forward. With a lens back on transportation, just some current realities that help us get an environment where we provide the best opportunity to maximize our student instructional time. So at the start of this year, the 22-23 school year, as the board approved in the April 2022 meeting, a 4-tiered system implemented with, at the start of this year, 85 routes. Employee shortages at the start of this year did lead to multiple delays, we have to acknowledge. However, less delays and less in length than what would have occurred, I need to be remiss if I didn't mention, in a 2-tiered system. And so absolutely, we're in a situation where we're better equipped to handle those delays, even though unfortunately they did exist. Amount of drivers is steadily increasing, as you know, as you approved in a prior meeting. Our CDL incentive program has been fruitful. 68 drivers to start the year, and 78 with 5 driver trainees just that do not have their CDLs yet as of September 6th. Excited, and I'll present another slide here coming forward that we have some more in the hopper, so to speak, more in the hiring process. We've increased our transportation office staff to provide more capacity to be able to address needs as they do come in. And I'd be remiss also here if, of course, as I see our director, Mr. Waddell, and of course, our assistant director, Mr. Goodwin here. I mean, we have just absolutely been increasing our staff hours, staff efforts. It's been a team effort, and everyone's pitching in to do the best job possible. Every job has its own situation where there's call-offs, and we've handled those appropriately when they have handled, or driver shortages where they have happened, right? Whether they're in a seat or not in a seat, we're coming together as a team, and we're putting together the best transportation plan we can possibly every single day. Hub and spoke optimization, lost instructional time minimization, of course, are a result of our efforts, but we are focusing on our realities moving forward. In April of 22, we brought to you the alarm bell. We did a study of data that we brought to the board, and at that time, our temperature check was as follows. Our baseline data was as follows. 32 total unique late buses at that time, 10 of which we defined as being of high frequency, at a daily average of 4 to 7 late minutes per bus, and an average of 20 to 35 minutes of lost instructional time per week for those that were showing up late. That equivalency was about a week in a school year, which we said was kind of like, at the time, I believe I used the phrase committing educational malpractice to not acknowledge that reality and do something about it. I'm pleased to bring to you today a set of improving data for you from August to September 22, an almost similar time period in days and in nature. In this period, 29 total unique late buses, 6 of which had a high frequency defined as 7 or greater late events, with a daily average down to 2 to 4 late minutes per bus, and or a 10 to 20 minute total loss per week instructional time. Now, that's still not ideal. We want that to be 0, but we are working towards minimizing that lost instructional time as a team to the best of our ability. And of course, in April, we will bring back, and we are ongoing and we are studying continuously, but we're hoping for that still to trail down, just like a graph down to 0 there. Yes, Mr. Grimes.
Those late unique events, is that morning only or is that morning and afternoon?
So these are events that affect lost instructional time.
So they're not taking into account trips home.
That's accurate, but usually these work with some symmetrical, symmetrical nature with one another. So typically it's like that, but it's not always. I mean, we could have a situation and there's changing demands every single day, as our transportation staff knows. It is quite difficult sometimes to predict, but to the best of our ability, this is what we have with the data that we've tracked. And just some, actually, to that note, and thank you, Mr. Grimes. So it's a good transition to this slide, because this is actually our metrics that we've tracked on anticipated delays to instructional time. And these are for our morning routes. What we can track with our data is our anticipated delays to services have been greatly reduced as this year has moved on, and our ridership is beginning to stabilize. I'll draw your attention on each of these graphs to the vertical bar, which kind of represents a switch over from what we had planned as far as our ridership to what we've realized as our ridership. We've done a lot of studying in our system, and as transportation office staff has been onboarding, we've been doing more interviews with our drivers and more discussion on routes to try to determine who's riding the bus, who's not riding the bus, and developing better systems for taking better attendance on those buses. As we've learned, we've actually greatly sort of reduced the attendance rosters in those buses, and we've been able to prune and work on routes and develop more optimal routing situations to the point where, as you're starting to see on this graph, particularly to the left, our anticipated delays are coming down. At the start of the year, we unfortunately had several that were on a greater than 45-minute delay to the start of this year, as many as the vertical axis would show up to 600 students at the start of the year. Pleased to let you know that as the year has worn on, it's been actually significantly reduced to the point where we don't quote a 45-minute delay unless it's a very extreme circumstance. It's actually been quoted as less than 25 minutes for a very significantly few amount of students in this corporation. So again, we would ideally like this to be 0 forever, but where we're at right now is an improvement over past circumstances. And of course, the graph to the right does show our difference between planned and realized ridership. We're sitting at right now about 82 routes that we can detect in our VersaTrans routing system, with a few one-offs here or there due to our special needs routes and ridership. But we can see that graph to the right is showing that that's starting to stabilize. So this is the point where we're going to kind of have more of an interactive panel to address some feedback that we received over this past month. And as a reminder to the board, over this past month, we've been soliciting feedback from our community, faculty, staff, as well as board members sitting here today on our strategic goals and priorities. This has been a quick link on our website for quite some time. We've sent this out to families, we've sent this out to community members, and we've been compiling questions and taking a really hard look at the feedback that we've been receiving over this past month. And so this will be the first, excited to go first in a series of sessions where we're going to be kind of answering this as a whole team. And as a reminder to the board, as Dr. Oswald already mentioned, I'll be calling on cabinet members today to answer based off of each topic that we have in front of us here today. So the first cohort will be questions that came from our community. And I'll just read in order kind of sequentially as I go throughout each slide. Ashley, a community member, asks, what work is being done to create infrastructure to support having a past teacher, PBIS instructional coach, and the offering of a school-wide fresh fruit and veggie snack to all Title I schools? And to answer this, I'll be calling on Dr. Prinkert.
Thank you. Good evening, board. So this is kind of a three-part question. The first one has to deal with the PASS teacher. That stands for Positive Academics and Social Skills Teacher. That is a program that is specific to Fairview at this time. And then the next area that is mentioned is the Positive Behavior Intervention Support, the PBIS. We do have PBIS coordinators in multiple schools. We continue to reevaluate that and look at that to determine if more are needed. We also have instructional coaches that we give a lot of training in this area on. And we also have the social workers in our elementary schools that also support in this area. And then the final area that I want to mention, and the third part of this question, is that fruit and veggie, the fresh fruit and veggie snack program. That's a federal program. And during COVID, we weren't able to be a part of that program due to the federal programs that they implemented, but we are going to be able to offer that for Fairview starting in October. And actually our other Title I schools, we hope to be able to add them next year.
Thank you. Next up is Polly, who asks, why were some of the previous after-school programs canceled for this year? I have not been able to find an explanation for this. And again, Dr. Prinker.
Yeah, so we're actually excited to be able to bring a lot of our after-school clubs back because during the height of the pandemic, we weren't able to offer some of them due to the social distancing and contact tracing. So we're excited that we're bringing them back. There is one change that we're also happy to share is that we're going to be offering all of our after-school clubs for free. We didn't want the cost of participating to be a barrier. So that's kind of an exciting. I will say it is dependent on staffing, depending on who we can get available to help staff those after school clubs. So sometimes one club may be offered one year and not another due to the staffing.
Thank you. Next up is Lindsay, who asks, is there a way to ensure the Park Square Drive, the road that Highland Park is on, is safer for transporting children, car riders, walkers, and bus riders? Every day this road gets backed up from pickup and drop off. And for this, I'll call on Mr. Kenny.
We are continuously working with the city of Bloomington to keep traffic flow issues to a minimum and to keep everyone safe. Specifically on our property, we are working with BRCJ civil engineers on a traffic flow analysis. This should lead to improved traffic flow on our grounds, which would then reduce congestion on Park Square Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. And last on this slide is what is the status of the Summit Bus Loop by Deborah and Mr. Kenny again.
Thank you. The goal from the Summit Bus Loop project was to separate parent pickup traffic from bus traffic. As of September 15th, the bus loop drive has been opened up, thereby separating buses from parent pickups. Finishing touches with landscaping are in progress as the final step.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. And as illustrated by some of that, just a few highlighted pictures here, and all indications are it's been a really successful project. And as a reminder, before I get to the next cohort of questions, just for our public, the four that were on that last slide were those related to Equity Goal 1. Of course, that is today's topic of presentation. If you asked a question on a different topic, that will be addressed at a future meeting to come. Okay, next up, we have feedback from our staff, and Dr. Oswald is going to tackle this one.
I'll just talk in some brief overview. We received a significant amount of feedback, ideas, concerns, and we asked for comments. So what we did was we took the themes that emerged, and they kind of aligned nicely with some of the input we've received from the board as we developed our strategic plan. Of course, number 4 was the desire for transportation improvements. We've talked about that earlier tonight, and you kind of get a feel for what we're doing to improve transportation. The other things revolve around programmatic choice that we mentioned earlier, how we're continuing to explore that. We don't have the solutions right now. There's a broader conversation that has to take place and more study to really look at what that programmatic choice looks like. Disparate impact barriers, and again, that's removing the barriers as we talked about earlier for opportunities. And there's a lot of things that can be, right? That could be unawareness of a program. It could be that it's the distance. It could be capacity. We've talked a lot about ready to learn rates and the concerns that are starting to, we're hearing more and more about that. And that is the number of students when they enter kindergarten that are ready to learn. And so that has a disparate impact in some ways. So number 3, new programs and opportunities. So again, that's exploring new programs that we can develop or expand and to increase opportunities for students. And number five, how we develop questions to ask ourselves regarding equitable outcomes. This focus on making sure that we're not just looking at implementing new programs, but we're studying those programs to make sure it's increasing the outcomes in an equitable manner, particularly for our historically marginalized population. A few of the comments that, just like with the community members asking questions, we wanted to share a few comments that we received from administrators that we thought were pretty poignant. I gotta maybe turn around if I can read this on here. How do we ensure equity is being considered when making systems of decisions? How do we know what is equitable? So this is a conversation we've had with the cabinet and we're continuing to have, again, to look at the equitability of what we're doing. It's got to be at the forefront of what we're doing. It's part of our strategic plan. It's one of our primary goals. A concern was brought, and that is the ease of which educators are willing to problem admire and not commit to doing the deep work that is required to result in changing outcomes. And that gets at the fact that we had several administrators say, we've talked about ideas before, and then we look the same decade after decade. And so we don't want to just admire the problems, but, and sometimes I can be guilty as well as allowing perfect to be the enemy of good. And we had several say, we got to try something. We got to start making steps. There's no perfect solution, but we do want to move the metric as it relates to equity. So great comment. And then how do we remain nimble and innovative, but also provide stability and reliability? And what does success look like? And our conversations related to that with several of our administrators, where it was basically to this idea that we want to be innovative, we want to be progressive, we want to continue to improve, but we don't want to be disruptive. We don't want to cause negative outcomes or with student learning. And we also know that if we do this in a very planned manner with a lot of research, it's more likely to be sustainable. And we heard that a lot. We don't want to just try thing after thing after thing and it be disruptive, not sustainable, and end up with negative outcomes. So these are just a few of the comments that we thought were pertinent from administrators that we wanted to share, as well as the themes from the staff feedback we received.
Thank you, Dr. Oswald. Finally, our last cohort are questions from our board. And our first one up is our capacity to provide before and after school care currently meeting the demand? Are we seeing a higher demand for before school care in elementary schools where the start time was moved later to improve our transportation system? And for this, I'll call on Dr. Prinkert with some data in the background.
Thank you. This is a huge celebration, actually, because in the past, we have actually had very long wait lists for extended day. And unfortunately, some families were never able to get that extended day care throughout the entire school year. I'm very pleased to report this year, we do not have any children on a wait list. We are serving all of our students. So that is a huge celebration compared to the past. And we're really grateful this year also. You can look at the numbers there and see, yes, the answer to the question, we do have a larger number of students that are coming in the morning. You can see the difference there from the 21-22 to the 22-23 school year. Also, you'll notice the free and reduced lunch difference. And that is a thank you to the board and to Dr. Oswald, because you'll remember we're actually providing extended day free of charge for people that qualify for free and reduced lunch. So we're really grateful to be able to do that. And we're excited to say that, yes, we are meeting that capacity. We are always still looking for staffing. So if anybody out there is listening and would be interested in working our extended day program, we would love to have you join us.
Thank you. Next up, is equity a barrier to changing start times? And Dr. Oswald.
And to this, the answer, in my opinion, as I talked with our cabinet, is yes, it currently is. And the reason we made the adjustments we made, and we talked about the data earlier, was that we were being inequitable, that those who required transportation from us to get to school were missing a significant number of minutes. And so changing start times does bring a concern of equity. Of course, as we find ways to hire more CDL drivers, I think the resolution and the referendum goals can assist with that. And as we get the additional CDL drivers, we want to make sure that as we look at our start times, we make sure that we keep equity at the forefront. And that is not making changes that are going to exclude students from academic opportunities or lose minutes of instruction. So the answer we believe is yes. As we talked about that as a cabinet. And of course, that cuts both ways, right? So we just have to continue to keep equity at the forefront of all of our considerations of changes.
Thank you, Dr. Oswald. Next up is the new transportation system meeting the needs of students that rely on transportation better than the other system. And I'll call on yours truly for that one. As some of the data showed and on prior slides, yes, we are improving steadily, and we are meeting needs of more students just based off of what we see as a district as improving efforts. We will continue our work in this area, and we will continue as we study new programs, new services, how we can deliver even better services to students that have a more diverse series of needs. And finally, when one student is offered special transportation to attend a program, can we allow siblings to attend that program or school too? Dr. Oswald.
And I'll answer that. The question was, can we? And of course, and generally we can do anything we want, provided we have the finances and we have the staffing to do so. We currently do not. And the thought behind that, in talking with our principals, talking with the cabinet levels is, we have traditionally, again, going back to equity, only allowed students that qualified for a program to take transportation to that program. What we find is that, for example, with the ALPS program, students are only eligible for a couple of years, right? There's only there for 2 years. And then when we start adding a kindergarten and a sibling link and the older student graduates, then the parent still demands that service. And that bus needs to go to a different community or different neighborhood for other students now that are qualifying for ALPS. And then that puts pressure on us needing additional buses that we don't have. So the sibling link is simple, perhaps, if there's space on the bus for the couple of years where they're both in the same program. But then when the qualifying student matriculates through, then we are in this quagmire. We know that in transition theory that the frequency of switching schools often can lead to learning loss for approximately 9 weeks. And so the idea is to not have students be required to move. And so if we were to transport a student, knowing that we could not continue that throughout their time at the new elementary school, then we could be creating a disruption. And also that could become inequitable for those who have the means to transport on their own several years later and those that don't. So that's sort of the background behind why we don't use a sibling link currently for allowing siblings to ride on buses for qualifying students. And there's not that many situations where that exists. There's another caveat to that. As we look at expanding access and through our hub and spoke program, and we look at perhaps regions or other schools and programs students may have access to, we do believe that there'll be more situations where students can opt into programs and have more opportunities and access, so that then that sibling link may be something that that becomes more of a reality, right? So if we have additional locations, for example, for an ALPS program, or if we have regional access to quality programs, all of these things would create a system by which we could more easily transport students and their siblings to additional choice opportunities close to home. And we know that those are many opportunities. We have no plans for that, but we know that as we design this system, we believe that there'll be better capacity to do the things that, working with the board and the community, we want to do. Right now, we're limited in some cases because of whether it's staffing or transportation logistics. We can't do anything. We don't have the solutions for what it will look like in 2024, but we're creating capacity. So when we do develop the ideas, the logistics and transportation isn't a barrier to doing those things that we believe are best for the community. So as we make those decisions of what looks best for our students and for our families going forward, we're creating capacity to do those things.
Thank you. Okay, next, are all elementary schools equipped to meet the needs of gifted learners that qualify for ALPS but do not elect to participate in the self-contained program? Dr. Prinkert.
Yes, we actually have high ability identified students at all 14 of our elementary schools. We also have a high ability coordinator, Addie Smith, and she works closely with the teachers and the principals in those buildings, as well as our curriculum instruction department, to provide professional learning and professional development for those teachers in the area of differentiated instruction. So the needs of all students can be met, regardless whether they stay in their building or they go over to the ALPS program.
Okay, thank you. Next up, is there a way to provide free lunch to everyone? Mr. Kenny.
Thank you. Currently, the federal government provides schools reimbursement for meals provided to students who meet the free reduced guidelines. The state of Indiana does not provide additional funding to cover school meals. The MCCSC has limited financial resources. In order to cover the additional cost of free lunch for everyone, we would need to make some difficult decisions on current staffing and programs to allow for these additional costs.
Thank you. Have we looked at expanding extended day for additional hours? Dr. Brinkert.
At this time, we're really proud of the fact that we do provide over 10 hours of supervision for children. They can get dropped off as early as 7 in the morning and stay till 5:45. So they already have a pretty full day that we are watching and caring for them. So at this time, we're not able to expand the hours, I think due to the staffing limited challenges there and just the pressures that we have in after school programming.
Thank you. And last up, how do we make our elementary schools more economically balanced? Dr. Hausel.
And I'll try to tackle this one because we don't have any answers tonight for this. This is probably one of the most profound and general questions that it's the heart of what we're talking about tonight is how do we create greater economic balance and opportunities? What does that look like? What does the research say? We had an in-depth conversation with a lot of our administrators on this topic, and this is what we want to look at going forward. And what does that look like? There's a lot of ways. I will tell you that there are challenges to this that are imposed on us by the state of Indiana, right? The state of Indiana has elected to implement some capitalistic forces on what was a traditional K-12 public education environment. That's charters, that's vouchers, and that's a large concern. I know that when the board receives training from Dr. McCormick on this process, I know we've had some conversations and there's a lot more information about that and those pressures, that there's certain things that we can't control on that. So how do we begin making our schools more economically balanced over time? In addition to the catchment areas where students are assigned, there's the complexities of transfers. And so sometimes the transfer piece can run counter almost to the choice and opportunity piece. So we have to take a look at that. And the first thing I've charged our cabinet with is beginning to explore and look at that data so we understand in many cases, the SES balance or the socioeconomic status of an individual school is not is reflective more of just the students that are attend there. Also impacted by that are the students that transfer to other schools. And so what does that look like? And how do we look at that policy? So I think this is a much broader conversation, but I do think that underlying this is our commitment to make our schools more balanced. But make no mistake that even through this conversation, we know that it costs more to educate a student in poverty. And so we want to, even as we try to find greater balance in our schools, we have to acknowledge that there's a greater amount of expenditures that should be placed on a student in poverty. Research has proven that over and over and over again. And we also know that when we look at making our schools more balanced, that also includes a deeper and broader conversation about early childhood education. And Indiana is one of only 7 states that does not fully fund a pre-K program. And so what that means is we heard this throughout earlier in the conversation, ready to learn. And what we're finding is that one of the greatest inequities we have is the degree by which students come to school ready or not ready to learn. And so we are also having conversations about what does that mean and how do we address that problem? Because as we began looking at the levels of impact for these various things, one of the greatest statistical coefficients that we find is this discrepancy that exists when students don't come to school ready to learn because they quite honestly don't have access or opportunity for any early childhood education. So these are other conversations we're having, and all of these things together. We want to be outcome minded, and that outcome minded is we want to make sure that we continue to move the bar in terms of graduation rate, the students at appropriate reading levels, reading fluent in 3rd grade, and ready to learn in kindergarten. All of those are our outcomes, right? And then these other things and what do we do in terms of access and opportunities and SES, greater SES balance and transfers and early childhood opportunities, all of those, right? We want to design those in a way in which we move incrementally to get balance, but ultimately to improve outcomes. We wanted to make sure that it's not so disruptive that there's immediate negative impact on students, and that also we are creating a system that is sustainable and continues to educate the students in our community based upon what our parents and community members are telling us they expect of us. So it's a much broader conversation, and it's something that this question should stay on our radar every time we have this conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Oswald. And thanks to our board, thanks to our community, thanks to our faculty and staff for submitting such awesome questions for us. I just think that it's so important that and it has been important for us to read this feedback and it help guide us in our work moving forward. And it really has just been enlightening to see the level of questions that's been coming into us on this topic. And I'm excited for future months for you to see even more interactive Q&A with these questions that are coming in. So to close today, just a few things that will be helpful for our public. One will be resources for transportation. In case you don't already know, everything that you possibly could need involving transportation does live on our transportation website, including tickets and forms for alternate bus stop requests, My Stop app assistance, Skyward Family Access tutorials, and so on and so forth that you can read here, as well as, of course, a plug for a link to our employment opportunities, mccsc.edu/jobs. It is important that, if you have questions, it's not just limited to our strategic board goals and priorities. If you have any transportation questions, please ask us. The best way to ask us a question is to ask us directly. So please use our utilities that we have out there to ask us when you have those questions. Some more expanded information, CDL incentive program, just as an update, has yielded, up to the time of me gathering this information, 10 additional drivers from us starting this year. 5 with a CDL, 5 that are trainees. Again, depending upon when you pick information, you could have different information, but I'm excited also to tell you that since I just last checked, we have approximately 5 more in the hiring process, 3 of which have CDLs. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't say that if you hire somebody that requires a CDL but does not have that, we will provide that training, but it can take a long time. It can take at least a month, if not in upwards of a couple of months. It's just really hard to say, okay, you want to work and be a driver, go drive. It takes a lot of training. And
Don't
so
let that deter you from applying.
don't let that deter you from applying. Certainly, we will provide that training. That's just an update to the realities of why I mentioned who has a CDL versus who does not have a CDL currently. So very well done. And then just in terms of wage ranges, as stated and as already previously approved, 20.25 per hour through 24.65 per hour. And then starting January 1st, that's up to 21.59 to 25.05 per hour for our drivers. Shall the referendum pass, that range will be 23.84 to 27.30. And we are one of, not many districts that offer full benefits for our drivers. It's not an 8-hour position. It's stated to be a 5-hour position, and it's full benefits. And so we have what we believe to be an extremely competitive package for drivers that want to come work for the MCCSC. And last but not least, next steps. So we've received feedback. We've been planning. We've been working as a team. What do we believe our next steps to be in our work on Equity Goal 1? Study current programs to determine which are best suited for more hub and spoke routing. Study data related to current student participation in programs by location and other demographics. Study data related to current student performance in programs by location and other demographics. Expanded usage of our 14 and 15 passenger vehicles, which do not require a CDL. And just a little more context on this. You've seen our 14 passengers, most likely in the community. They're painted a different color. 15 passenger vehicles actually can be driven without a CDL and just a driver's license. They have the stop arm, which is very important if you're transporting a student home. And a 14 passenger, you're required by state law to pull up in the driveway to drop a passenger off. But the 15 passenger, you can utilize the stop arm as you're dropping a student off. So it's very important that we expand our usage of those vehicles to provide more capacity for hub and spoke routing. Continue data gathering and analysis on our arrival and departure times, of course. Professional development opportunities for our transportation staff. They've been asking for professional development in tons of areas, and we're going to provide it. So October 5th of 22, we're going to provide, for instance, driver training on de-escalation strategies, similar to other training that occurs in our district and provided by some really excellent folks over in the special education department. And of course, continual driver recruitment. So thank you very much for listening to us here today. As a reminder, on October 25th, our next board meeting, we will present on professional learning, which is Equity Goal 2. Of course, we welcome questions in advance, and we ask for you to submit them on our website. These are over all of our presentations, not just Equity Goal 2, but specifically, if you want your questions addressed on this particular goal, We ask that you get them in prior to the next board meeting. And as a reminder of our timeline of work, and this is cyclical and iterative to each month of this process. So it's going to be kind of like Groundhog's Day, right? At the start of each month, we're going to be fielding feedback from our community, as well as our principals, faculty, and staff, as well as into the next couple of weeks of each month, feedback from our Board of School Trustees and our teachers. And all of that work is going to guide the cabinet in terms of making preparations for what you'll be seeing for the next meeting, as well as a presentation on that Tuesday, the 25th. So if you're looking to get in feedback for the team to address in the next presentation, make sure you're submitting it by that week of October 17th. And with that, I say thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the board regarding the presentation that was brought before us?
Everybody looks at me, right? Okay. No, I am really grateful, Adam, and to the rest of the administrative cabinet. I think this was really helpful for me, and I'm sure for the community as well, just to get some information on these topics. And so it was extraordinarily thorough. I think, you know, the sort of process itself was clear. And so yeah, I appreciate it. I have a question or two. Can I ask?
If we can bring the information back if we don't know.
Okay.
I know that, yeah, I mean, we may not. I mean, there's additional conversations, but yeah, if we know off the top of our head, we don't want to misstate.
Okay, yeah, sure. So there were just a couple of things that popped up that I was either reminded of or just had a sort of curious question about. And maybe you mentioned it, but I don't know. Do we know if our ridership has gone, is it up or down from last year?
We have a graph on the right.
Yeah, I can go back to that.
I
But
saw that, but I'm sort of like trying to turn around.
so in essence too, keep in mind, we routed this year to 100% of what we anticipated our riders to be. So that started out as kind of a large number in and upwards of the 8,400 amount. And keep in mind our enrollment of students, you know, it vacillates, but you know, let's call it 10,300. And I know we have a count that we're certifying, but let's call it 10,300. So we anticipated there being 8,400 out of that possible set of individuals to be riders. We know that realistically, our target for ridership is probably going to be 85% of that number. And historically, we know that's about true. And so we see it settling into levels that have been historical for us, meaning the needle's not moved much. It's been historically around these levels, and it only scales when we have more enrollment or
You see that it
less.
kind of levels out around Labor Day, right? Labor Day is when we tend to, and over again, enrollment tends to level out. You know, there are states that don't start school till Labor Day. There's others. We see shuffling. We see students coming in. Then, of course, on September 15th, we do an ADM data cleanup. So around Labor Day, things start to level out. And that's what you see here. And you notice that the decline isn't like when there was a lot of late buses. It actually, the decline happened when we were at 0 most of the days. So the reality is people start getting into a rhythm. They figure out, okay, these days, maybe it's easier if I do this. Maybe remember if a student decided to go into an extended day program, right? Things like that. When that goes up, ridership probably goes down. So there's a lot of factors, but we're hovering around 7,000 to 7,200, which is a large number of our students, right? That if you know, just rough percentages, we're looking somewhere around 32%, 30 to 32%, or excuse me, 70 to 72%. So we do have a lot of riders. It gives you.
Yeah. And again, I know that this is a nationally, right? This is a sort of difficult or issue to solve for. And, you know, I've seen districts, I've just sort of keep reading about districts trying to find strategies, and some of them just like abandoning busing altogether because they just can't do it, right? And having to like compensate parents or work with the city. So I know that there's been a lot of noise, and rightfully so for many people, it's difficult, right? I get that. But I do appreciate the efforts to find a solution in the midst of that sort of chaos. So that was one question. Thank you for that. The other one, probably, Dr. Prankert, is for you. So I think one of the first questions that came up was about the fruit and vegetable cart thing. One thing that I saw on a parent group, and so this is just like one of those things that like passes through my consciousness at some point as I'm scrolling. But I did see someone say something about at some point in some schools, maybe last year, there was some sort of like cart of items like free snacks or something in elementary schools. And I don't know how true this is or not, but someone was saying like, is there a way in which you could So like when items are left over from lunch that are unopened, and I think students tend to just like throw that stuff away, is there a way for them to deposit like an unopened item into a bin or something that could then be like used for students who might need that extra food? Just something, not that you have to answer on the spot,
Let's get some details
but I
on
just
that.
thought,
I know some schools do have that.
Okay.
But I don't want to state it conclusively.
Mhm.
And I know that with some of our younger students, there's more a monitoring of which students take which food. With
absolutely.
allergies and
Totally.
awareness. So let's get some more information because I don't want to misspeak on that.
Yeah, okay, it's cool. Just thought I would throw it out there.
Any other comments from the
Thank
board?
you.
I just want to reiterate what April said. It's so nice to have this open communication, this data, and this ability to see things moving from the abstract to the concrete. And so I'm really grateful for that because this is about as transparent as a school district could be. And it's so, in part, sometimes when people say you're not being transparent, it's just because they didn't know because it wasn't either communicated well or they were just not aware. And so this is just a really nice way of hitting people several different ways to get people involved and informed.
And
No.
we're grateful because, the board has set this, one of your primary responsibilities, right? Is setting goals and helping us set the direction and working through a strategic plan. And someone said, when are we going to do the next strategic plan? And we'll continue to review it and revise it. But this is giving us a direction. We're just sort of marching through these different topics that's heavy lifting. It's heavy on your heart. It's heavy on our community's heart on some of these things. And we're trying to do it in a way that there's not a negative impact academically on students, that it's not disruptive. It doesn't come with fiscal consequences that leads to reduction in force, but it is this movement towards a direction the board has set. And we appreciate the clarity and the expectation. So, and we get a wide range of questions from our community and from our staff. And so I know it kind of jumps around a little bit there, but we do want to try to be responsive to the different concerns that are brought forth. So I'm grateful to the board for giving us the clarity and the direction you want to go. And hopefully this kind of, we were trying to do 15 minutes today. Tonight was maybe 30. But again, what? It's supposed to be 5, but again, we don't want, I will say this, and this has come from the direction of the board. The board has been very clear that things that are rote or routine, that don't have the concerns and the questions can be done quicker, and that we have more time for these kinds of conversations. So we're hoping that it does change the structure of the meeting a little bit, and not that it is longer, but that we try to be more efficient and we try to focus on the things that the community wants to talk about and that you guys are interested in. Okay, Elizabeth?
I just want to say I could also see that there's a lot of creativity going into the problem solving, and I appreciate that. I know that there's a lot of, it just takes a lot right now, especially with the staffing crisis the whole nation is in. So I just really appreciate that you're embracing that and stretching in ways you probably never thought you had to stretch before.
That's it.
Thank you.
Well, that's good insight. And it's very true. Creativity on all fronts. Even I know that board member Hennessy made a comment last month and noticed, we have an English person with a communication plan helping roll out this so that it's routine. You can see that, right? There's creativity in the approach, but also some systematic pieces so that we can make sure we kind of walk through this in a way that it's both creative, but also that we dot our I's and cross our T's. So got a great team working on these things, and they keep reminding me they have other responsibilities day to day as well.
Any other comments from the board? No? All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Oswald and the entire cabinet for your presentation tonight. I appreciate it. Does the board have any comments or reports that they would like to share at this moment? No? All right. Thank you, everyone, for being present and for the reports that you've brought in the past and comments. And thanks for the comments that you've brought throughout the school board meeting tonight. Finally, Dr. Oswald, just do you have any additional information that you would like to share with us tonight?
I do. I might have been hoping that a couple of you said something so that you didn't look at me like, here he goes again. I do want to commend Indiana University and several of our partners on a student learning recovery grant. We have information on our website, but it's more than $2 million in grant. And it does all of the following things. It does a summer jumpstart program for students. We have IU pre-service teachers, mostly freshmen and some sophomores, working individually with students, with over 400 students last year, over 400 students individually impacted. We have our Boys and Girls Club providing programming, academic, and supervisory during our breaks. to help with the learning loss and some other support. We have an adult and child school-based services program, community and schools community program, and some expanded learning teachers that are in our schools during the day to specifically to work with students based on when teachers identify whether it's achievement gaps or specific areas that need differentiation, both scaling up and down. We have these expanded learning teachers. All of this has come through this grant. And in looking at our data, we did our first year celebration last Friday, and the folks at IU were here along with Dean Maroney and her staff. Some of the people directly involved are supporting programs like the Boys and Girls Club. And what we found already that was in the first year, we're already seeing outcomes associated with increasing our math and language arts scores and 3 to 8, and a lot of these data points. So it's made a difference. And I'll give you one last number on that. Last year, because of this program, we provided an additional 6,000 individual hours of additional academic, social, emotional, college, career reading support to our students, 6,000 hours through this program. So year 2 starts now, and it's a 3-year program. We're excited about it. And I have some great quotes here. One of that we surveyed some family members. So my son loved coming every day and fell in love with the teacher in this program. It was a great experience. Students were eager to work with me and engage during the lesson. I'm very happy I participated in this program, and great feedback from our teachers as well. So I want to mention that STEAM night at the Academy of Science and Entrepreneurship is going to be on Thursday, October 6, 2022. It begins at 6 p.m. There's information on our website. We'll be pushing it out on social media, but the STEM mobile lab will be there, K-12 school clubs, IU education, various community partners. As one example, the ASC biology students are going to record voices and help guide the participants through turning the sound wave into a piece of art using watercolor and ink. It's going to be good for me as well. So I also want to remind people that from September 15th to October 15th, it's National Latinx Heritage Month, and there's a lot of ways we're celebrating in our individual classrooms and through our curriculum, also in our schools. And there's information on our website on that, and we'll continue to get some examples of the exciting things happening as part of that the National Latinx Heritage Month next month. And then one last reminder: the fall break is Thursday, October 13th and 14th. The school year is almost 25% of the way through. We have a lot to be grateful for, but we do. I know that there's many people who have told me that they are looking forward to fall break. And with that, I close my comment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oswald. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting will be held on Tuesday, October 25th, 2022. We are adjourned. Have a great night. We are adjourned, not adjoined. Have a great night.
Oh, Randy and Paul, don't leave until you sign for us. It'll be easier than tracking you down. The MOU. Karen has it. I was hoping you'd be here, Randy. I knew Paul would be. Well, sorry.
That's hilarious.
Good, how are you? I like your outfit.
Hey, they did pretty well.
Oh, good fun.
That